Boldwood presents Kings of War, written by M.J. Porter, and read by Matt Coles. The moral right of the author has been asserted. This performance is owned by Boldwood. Prologue. September 934. Cirencester, England.
Edgarfu, the Lady of Wessex. The feast is spectacular, as always. The cooks have outdone themselves, yet the food tastes like dust in my mouth. While I watch all in the hall, my focus remains on King Constantin of the Scots. The aldermen, bishops, and those of the king's household warriors honoured with a seat in the king's hall remain on the periphery. Occasionally I summon a servant to my side with a hasty word or remonstrance for something not done to my satisfaction. But it's King Constantin that I gaze at, time and time again. He's an old man, grey and haggard, more monk-like than a warrior king, even his fine clothes seeming tarnished, as though he spends his days on his knees and not ruling a kingdom. But I know his bearing masks much. As soon as I laid eyes on him, a shiver, not of triumph but of foreboding, rippled through my body. King Constantine isn't at all the image of my late husband Edward of England, and yet, had Edward lived and not died a decade ago, the two would have been of age. Seeing Constantine brings back unwelcome reminders of my thankfully short marriage, but makes me realize that this enemy of King Athelstan isn't to be lightly dismissed. My husband, alongside his sister and brother by marriage, fought their entire adult lives to reunite the part of their kingdoms lost to the advance of the Viking raiders, the Norse, as it's now easier to name them. The kingdom of the East Angles, the lands to the east of Mercia, and, of course, my birth kingdom of Kent, were all handed over to the Norse by King Alfred, who some laud as saving the Saxons from being overrun. King Constantin has done the same. Athelstan, my husband's son, but a man older than me, has picked up his father's warrior helm and accomplished even more, intending to drive the Norse permanently from Britain. And yet, in doing so, it seems apparent that Athelstan has created a new enemy for himself. King Constantin. King Constantin was meant to be an ally, but instead he's been brought to his knees after the Battle of Cait, in the far northern lands of the Kingdom of the Scots. His punishment for meddling in the succession to the northern kingdom of Bamborough. Athelstan is victorious. Constantin is here, at Cirencester, to bend the knee. This worries me, but more than anything, the part that my beloved son has played in the expedition to the land of the Scots concerns me more. I didn't embrace Edmund riding to war with his much older stepbrother. I welcomed the news even less upon receiving word that Edmund is forging battle renown for himself. Not just any battle renown either. No. My son killed King Constantine's grandson in a fair fight. But the young lad's dead, whether it was fair or not. While I'm grateful that it wasn't Edmund who bled his last on that faraway battlefield in the northernmost region of Cait, one of the ancient kingdoms making up the land of the Scots, I know more than any other about the unending bond that's formed between my son and King Constantine. I know what it is to crave revenge, to need it more than anything. The Norse killed my father before my birth. For all that, I hold dear to the memories others share about him, even if they come from my detested mother and uncles. I know my father was a great man, a firm ally of the House of Wessex, and now I fear for my son, because I understand what it is to be driven by vengeance. Again and again I pull my eyes away from the craggy face of King Constantin of the Scots. Again and again I try not to look at my son, seated beside his stepbrother, the king, at the feast. Athelstan couldn't have made it any clearer that he holds young Edmund in high regard. Again and again I try to quell the thudding of my rapidly beating heart and enjoy the labours of the cooks for this fine feast in Cirencester, deep in the core of the English kingdom, and yet my unease won't dissipate. The battle has been won against the kingdom of the Scots. King Constantin's here in the middle of England, but there is no solace to be found in that. If King Constantine can be here, in the heart of England, my son will never be safe from those seeking vengeance against him. While Constantine might be old, his son, Ildulb, the father of the boy Edmund killed, isn't. Raising a hand as a thought strikes me, my servant hastens to my side. Ensure the king's especial warriors, Siglac and Floodwin, know I wish to speak to them as soon as the feast's concluded. I whisper into the ear of my faithful servant. The woman bows deeply, no hint of surprise in her stance at receiving such an unexpected order, when she can have expected to be told to bring more wine or ale. My lady, is all the confirmation I receive, her words lacking all inflection. I reach for my goblet and drink deeply of the tart wine. I savour the sensation over my tongue, as King Constantine meets my eyes from his place to the other side of King Athelstan. He sits beside one of his other sons, Alpin, who has been a hostage in Athelstan's court to ensure his father's good behaviour since the Treaty of Aymont 10 summers ago. He's lucky to still live after his father's defiance. I can't see that either are comfortable in one another's presence. Constantine might be a wily, craggy old man, a warrior of fierce renown in his younger days, when he beat back all contenders to his kingdom, including the Viking raiders. But I've been at the king's court for many summers. King Constantine won't win this time. He'll never win. But perhaps it's important that he thinks he might. I meet his eyes, raising my wine goblet in greeting, and for a moment I detect something more than grief for his grandson in the tight stance of the defeated man. He remains defiant, a man who hasn't been brought easily to his knees, a man who's used to winning and not losing. When the spectre of the defeat not 2 months ago leaves him, he'll be troublesome and bold. He'll want to overthrow Athelstan. He'll want to kill my son. He'll want to counter the humiliation of being brought before the English king's witan to repledge his allegiance to the peace treaty of Aymont. King Constantine's capitulation could portend trouble for the House of Wessex, but I'm alert to it already. I'll ensure my young sons and stepson, the king, are protected as best I can. I smile, straining my tight cheeks at the other man. King Constantine's white tufted cheeks rise in reciprocity. He'll not remain conquered for long. I'm sure of that.
Part 1. An Uneasy Peace. Chapter 1. October 934. Dunatar, the Kingdom of the Scots.
Constantin, King of the Scots.
I'll kill him, My son face Puce with rage menaces, and not along with him. Ildulb's likely to rupture if anyone utters a word in denial of his decision. I want nothing more than to revel in delight at being home, even if the loss of Amleb, my grandson, murdered by Prince Edmund of the English, is felt keenly whenever I glance at my remaining collection of grandsons. I feel soiled by my time at Athelstan's court in England. I shudder at the recollection of it. I'd been paraded as a slave before the court of the upstart English king. I was defeated, but I'll rise above it. Those jeering looks of the king's aldermen and thanes, his archbishops and bishops, won't last long. No. I'll gain my revenge and my battle renown, even if I die doing so. All I need is the opportunity, and that opportunity exercises my mind, even while my son Ildulb rants and rages. Ildulb disappeared from the English king's court, and I don't know where he's been. Not that I don't have my suspicions. Neither, I consider, do I think that King Athelstan allowed Ildulb to leave without him being watched until he left England's vast kingdom. Revenge. It burns, white and hot inside me. I must have it. I must. I've ruled my kingdom for over 30 winters. Never in all that time has someone vanquished me as Athelstan has done. Not for the first time, I rail at my failure to triumph over the English king. I should have been better prepared. Equally, I shouldn't have enticed King Athelstan into my kingdom. I'm not fool enough to appreciate that I don't shoulder some of the blame for this. I can feel the power of Mal Column's delighted smirk from where he sits before the hearth. The man, my acknowledged heir, but not my son, thinks to gain from my failure, and that can never happen. What I need is to reassert myself and bring Athelstan to his knees, as he did to me. Now that I know the correct roads to take, I can envision myself at the English king's royal palace in Cirencester. I can, if I close my eyes, imagine riding at the head of my brave Scots warriors along their ancient road, Ermine Street. I'll urge my men to take their revenge, not just for the death of Amleb, but for all the English have done to the proud kingdom of the Scots. King Athelstan has thought to unite every kingdom against the ravages of the Dublin Norse, and any other stragglers who think to try their luck along the many rivers and coastlines of the English kingdom. But in doing so, he's made another enemy, and one that's much closer to home. The Scots will take revenge for their humiliation at the hands of the English. Yes, the English have now receded, and yes, King Athelstan has graciously restored the terms agreed upon at Airmont a decade ago, but that's not enough. We've been disgraced. We're a proud people, and we will not accept it. Not that I think it'll be possible to gain my vengeance alone, no. The battle at Cait shows me that the English king has far superior numbers to mine. I need an alliance, just as he did to counter the might of the people of the kingdom of the Scots. He brought his Welsh kings with him to Cait. I need to do the same when I overawe the English. Are you listening to me? The hot words of Ildulb cut through the image of the future playing out before my eyes when I'm ruler over England and the kingdom of the Scots. Sorry, son. I was thinking of King Athelstan. And I was thinking of his stepbrother Edmund. I'll kill him! Ildulb hisses, his face so close to mine that I can smell his rankness. Ildulb needs to stop drinking and discard his desire to drown his sorrows and gain some vengeance. I'll kill him, he repeats. Lightning quick, I grab my son's arm, pulling him closer. Don't let anyone hear you say that. I order harshly. They can't know of our plans. I cast my eyes around the room. There are men and women here spying for the English king. I'm sure of it, but I don't know who they are. Not yet. Our plans? Ildulb's incredulous. Our plans? Oh, yours are a little more than a tale to tell children and those lucky enough to live through battles. Your plan involves that useless Scot and his dry words, which are impossible for most to decipher and nothing further. It's been many winters now, and I had no outcry from the Welsh kingdoms. If Yule was any closer to King Athelstan, they'd share clothes. Where are the swords, sea-axes and warriors, My plan, father, will bring Athelstan's death and that of his bastard brother. I'll kill all the surviving sons of King Edward, and then I might turn my attention to his daughters as well. My plan, I reassert over his harsh whisper. If he weren't my son, I'd have him killed for speaking to me with such disdain. I'd have him killed for even speaking of the Scot and his words. I can't allow anyone to know how I've been slowly and carefully unravelling Athelstan's peace accord by stirring up problems with the Welsh. Will be nothing compared to mine! Ildulb almost shouts triumphantly. While you allowed the English king to feast you, parade you before his minions, I, father, I have been working on a means to finish them all, once and for all. I just managed to suppress the derision from showing on my downturned face. My son's questioning me, bringing my proposals into question. How dare the little git? I am the king here, not him. And what have you been doing? I forced through tight lips, determined not to allow others to see the spurt of fury I filled towards Ildulb. If Malcolm realises we're at crossed purposes, he'll seek to undermine me. If others realise that Ildulb blames me for the death of his son, then my future plans for him will be curtailed. I, father, have been sounding out allies. Olaf Gothfrithson of Dublin, I counter calmly. It's yet to be seen whether he can hold his kingdom, let alone strike out against the English. And anyway, how have you made contact with him? I'm curious. If there are those in my kingdom communicating with the Dublin Norse, then I need to know their identity. I'll not allow any dissent. All communications will be at my command, not my son's. Once more I cast my eyes around the room, not paying any attention to Malcolm and his collection of allies. For this, the threat won't come from him, but from someone who thinks to hover beneath my attention. Who thinks their loyalty should be to the Dublin Norse, not to me and the kingdom of the Scots. Father, Ildulb growls, attempting to yank his arm free from my grasp. You're not the only one with a collection of spies and informants. Slowly I release my grip, attention entirely focused on my son. Perhaps some who conspire are more than servants looking to make extra coin for their troubles. But my son, I'm sure he'd never act against my wishes. Would he? I'm the only one who'll treat with the Dublin Norse. I intimidate, only to be met with the wild eyes of Ildulb, triumph on his flushed face, saliva dripping into his beard, the smell of sweat emanating from him. And you are, father, you are. All is being done in your name, even if you don't yet bloody know it. He laughs, and I fear the death of his son has made him half-crazed. How dare he begin negotiations with the Dublin Norse? How dare he threaten the life of Alpin, still held captive by the English king, in order to ensure my compliance to the peace treaty? And yet, I consider, calming myself, who else is there to combat Athelstan? Perhaps it's only with the help of the Dublin Norse that I'll bring Athelstan to his knees. After all, Alpin still lives. The English king has shown his weakness in that regard.
Chapter 2, 934. Ireland.
Olaf Gothfrithson, King of the Dublin Norse. My lord! The man bends low before me, his nose almost scraping the muddy ground beneath our feet. What? I glower. Now isn't the time to be distracted with news from anywhere other than Limerick. That bastard Olaf Scabbyhead will be mine. I just need to kill the upstart, and then my rule over the Dublin Norse, and those Norse from Limerick, will be secure. The man flinches from me, but doesn't move aside. I shrug, admiring him for that. Few would risk my wrath, my brothers amongst them, especially when it's clear I mean to battle against one of my enemies. I bring you a message. A message? What use do I have for a message? I speak in deeds and actions, not bits of parchment that the Christ men insist on using. From the King of the Scots. The man speaks into the mud, for all his words reach my ears clearly. Oh? I huff. I don't know whom he speaks about. Constantin, the King of the Scots, the man reiterates. I try to conjure up a face to the name. Which bloody tribe are the Scots? Where do they live? Who's their high king? Are they part of the Inil or some other clan? Then I growl. The Scots aren't an Irish tribe. They're from over the sea, a part of the island of Britain. I remember who they are now. The man who refused to help my father capture Jorvik from the English king after the death of Citric. Yes, my lord. The man doesn't hesitate to agree with me. I admire him afresh for such courage in the face of my growling fury. How I've forgotten the man, albeit briefly, I don't know. Oh, stand up! I glower, thinking if he doesn't, I can't kick him to the mud for the audacity in thinking I'll listen to anything he has to say. The man, older than I expect, slowly lumbers to his feet. He's no great warrior, or if he was, those days are so long behind him that all of his fighting prowess has drained away, along with the hair that must have once covered much more of his head. Yet I recognize him. He's one of those men, I'm sure of it, who's made Dublin his home for more winters than I have. Did he serve my father? I wish I could recall. Tell me what it is and get away from here. My lord. The man offers once more. I'm trying to think of his name. He must be a Halfdan or an Ivar. One of the names that seem to fit everyone. I'm sure he has some other title. Skull Splitter, the Black. I find my mind wandering as he composes himself to deliver the message from this Constantin, King of the Scots. The King of the Scots has heard of your great victory against the Irish tribes, and he's eager to assist you in claiming back Jorvik from the English king. The man sneers as he speaks of the English. He's old enough to have fought those warriors when they were merely from the kingdom of Mercia, Wessex, or even the East Angles, before they were all English. And why would I want anything to do with him? I jab. Since my father lost Jorvik, I have done little but fight. First at my father's side to retain his hold on Dublin, but since his death, alongside my brothers, forging our destiny. What need do we have for an ally who turned tail on our father?
He's a powerful man, filled with a thirst for vengeance.
The man offers, his bushy grey eyebrows bouncing high. Well, one does. The silvery glint of a long-ago wound revealing itself over his left eye. How do you know this? I counter, intrigued despite myself. I'm sure that Constantin is filled with the desire for revenge, but after what I heard about the English king, I don't believe that Constantin has anything to offer me. He's a weak man. He's an old man. His warring days are far behind him. I hear he didn't even face the English, but allowed his sons and grandsons to stand in his stead. I'd sooner not ally with someone who might drop dead at any moment.
I've been to the kingdom of the Scots. The man juts his heavily bearded chin forwards. I've spoken with those who forged this alliance. They know I'm a man to be trusted.
Do they now? I drool. I'm unconvinced. This man... there I have it. He's Snorri the Black. He fought with King Sihtric of Jorvik. I remember the tales surrounding him. He's always been a lucky warrior. He's also as likely to want vengeance against Athelstan of the English as Constantin. Snorri the Black lost much when the English took Jorvik after Sihtric's death. So, you've spoken to this Constantin. A flicker of uncertainty over the man's face, and I know he hasn't. Bloody fool for staking his life on such an easily disproved claim.
Not him, but his son, the mad one, the one who will be his heir when that Malcolm is dead.
What? I snarl. What are you talking about?
The Scots. Constantin's son isn't his heir. Malcolm is, and then, when Malcolm's dead, Constantin's son can rule. It's him I've spoken to. Ildulb. The English killed his son. He thirsts for revenge. He can barely speak a sentence without mentioning how he'll enact it.
So, you've spoken to the son of the Scots king, and he told you of his father's desire for an alliance. I'm trying to get everything straight in my mind. I can't deny that the more I hear, the more I believe this might not be a bad idea. I want Jorvik back. I've endured near enough a decade of men taunting me for all my father lost. Once I've triumphed over Olaf Scabbyhead of Limerick, and with my brothers holding Dublin secure, I can finally reassert our family's hold over Jorvik. I can even think of a way I might countenance this alliance.
I did, my lord, yes.
A look of relief touches Snorri's cheeks at my reasoned words. And
he suggests an alliance.
And what are the details of this alliance? I huff, frustrated once more. It's taken too long to get to the point of the conversation, and now Snorri has no details.
Now, that's open to negotiation. Ildulb offered no particulars, but he made it clear everything's open to negotiation. Everything.
I doubt everything. I counter, licking my lips all the same. An alliance with the Scots king could give me a level of permanence in the eyes of the Irish clans, and those of Norse descent who think to take Dublin from me. It would mean I was acknowledged as the king of Dublin Norse by those outside Ireland. That's worth a great deal, as would be the aid of others to win back Jorvik. When my father lost the settlement, he lost half his wealth and many of his oath-sworn men. I'd welcome more warriors to fight on my behalf, especially if I weren't the ones shouldering their cost. I need details. I huff. Snorri nods so vigorously that I think his few remaining teeth might shake loose. A meeting will be arranged, Snorri concludes. Who will you send to speak on your behalf? I feel my lips twist at this. I want to go. I do, but I can't. Not when I need to counter Olaf Scabbyhead's claim over Limerick. One of my brothers, I exhale. But which one will depend on whom I trust the most, and what the southern and northern Inil are doing at the time. And that remains to be seen.
Chapter 3, 934. The Kingdom of the English. Athelstan, King of the English. Tell me. I listen with half a smile. I can understand young Edred's desire to hear everything of our journey to Cait in the kingdom of the Scots. Equally, I understand Edmund's reticence to speak of it as often as his younger brother wants to hear it. Beneath the byrnie, my chest heaves as I struggle to suck in much-needed air. I've been practicing for much of the morning, facing my loyal warriors Siglak and Floodwin, Athelstan and his brother Edric. Edric's a mean fighter, mean and devious, yet I admire him. It's good for me to fight against men I've not grown used to. Siglak and Floodwin's movements are almost as well known to me as mine. Not that Edred's alone. Louis is at his side, the pair of them wearing tunics and trying to look as magnificent as the fighting men are at least as sweaty as the rest of us. It's a cold day, but we've all been working hard to ensure, should the need ever arise again, that we'll be ready and prepared to face England's foe, the Norse. He fought valiantly. Edric booms over the higher-pitched voices of the youngest of our party. I'm surprised the boys haven't been recalled by their mothers, but then perhaps they welcome having them away from beneath their feet for a moment or two to themselves. Not that I think that Lady Edgarfu, my father's third wife, will be taking her ease, but my stepsister, the exiled queen of the West Franks, is probably gossiping with her women. Perhaps she attempts to find out news of how Edhild fares in West Francia with her husband Hugh, Count of the Franks. But perhaps not. I'm unsure if the childhood rivalry of the pair has healed, or if they would still fight if positioned in the same room as one another. I'd also listen, but I have clerics who succinctly inform me of new developments as they receive the information from their ears in East and West Francia. He ate well before the battle, mind. Edric continues. I find a smile on my lips to match that of Edric's broad one. It's good to be here, surrounded by my family and allies, some of whom I hope are my friends. Please don't. Edmund's face winces at the reminder of how he vomited after the Battle of Cait. He's no cause to be embarrassed. I know of no man who can say they didn't. It either comes out the mouth or the arse when the battle is won. Ethelwald, Edric's brother, isn't smiling, but his eyes dance with the joy of recalling a fight well won. And with all that food in his belly... Edric continues to recount, Edred and Louis hanging on his every word. Young Edmund here slew the Scots scum, He slit their throats open. He turned their innards to outwards. He took the life of every one of the 20 Scots who dared lay about him. I chuckle. The telling gets more outrageous each time it's told. Edric is wasted as a warrior. He should be a scop. 20. Louis gasps, his lips a-quiver. Louis and Edmund are the same age, but Louis didn't travel to the kingdom of the Scots. His fight doesn't lie in the north of England, but rather to the south across the narrow sea, in the kingdom he's been exiled from since no more than a babe. With that sword? Edred questions simultaneously, pointing to the blade in Edmund's hand. Edred is the youngest of us all. He's barely a man, yet he must learn to fight for his kingdom. With this very sword, Edric continues, bending to grip Edmund's right arm, where he holds the blade. I glance at it, almost expecting it to flash with the maroon of shed blood, but it's merely dulled by the sweat of those who fought today. Edmund allows his arm to be raised high, a rueful look on his face. He killed the Scots king's grandson with this very sword. He nearly killed the Scots king's son as well. That's not true. But legends of battle prowess must begin somewhere. Edric's working hard on Edmund's. None of us is about to cast doubt on Edric's words, especially to Louis and Edred. Their faces are a balm to any troubled soul, even Edmund's. He's become a warrior, but realizing what it truly means has been hard on him. He spent much time praying, trying to find comfort in knowing that he acted to protect his kingdom. I can't say taking the life of another will ever be easy, but he'll come to accept it for what it is. A king must kill to protect his kingdom and his people. So my aunt and uncle taught me when I was a similar age in Mercia, learning to fight and defend Mercia from the Welsh and the Norse. And of course, with every kill made, there are merely more warriors who wish to seek their vengeance against you. That I've also learned well.
Will you kill the Scots king with it as well?
Louis exhales, only for silence to fall amongst us all. I can feel the eyes of others on me. Will I kill the Scots king? Wily old Constantin? No, I don't believe I will.
King Constantin is our ally now.
Edmund speaks hastily. Louis must belatedly realize what he's said. Worried eyes look my way, and they aren't just the eyes of Alpin, Constantin's son, who's a hostage at my court. Younger than Ildulb, but older than Constantin's grandsons, Alpin is a lively man. For all he's a hostage to ensure the good behaviour of his irresponsible father. There'll be no more war with King Constantin. I offer quickly. We are at peace with the kingdom of the Scots now. We have a peace accord with every one of our neighbours on the island of Britain.
And yet we still train to kill.
Louis isn't to be easily put off. I nod, considering his words. He makes a fair point, and equally for him to reclaim his kingdom of the West Franks, from which he was rescued as a small baby when his father was captured and his kingdom stolen, he'll probably need to fight. And if he does manage to reclaim it, he'll have to fight to keep it. The kingdom of the West Franks is far more violent than the English kingdom. Peace is always the answer. I speak into the growing stillness. But to ensure it, we must be prepared to give our lives to protect our kingdom, whether it be England or that of the West Franks or Denmark. I add as well, noting that young Hakon has joined the growing group of sweating warriors. To be a king means accepting that our foes may wish to desolate us. I caution. What started as a jovial conversation has become anything but, and I'm reminded of the words I spoke at my consecration as England's king.
Then there can never be an end to war.
Edred challenges. His eyebrows furrowed so tightly on his slight face that it makes him look even younger than his 12 winters. There can never be an end to the threat of war, no. I confirm. But that doesn't mean there'll always be war. And anyway, Edric raises his voice above the silenced men and boys. If there was no war, then how would we get to see what Edmund ate to break his fast on the way back up? He chortles. The sound is deep and infectious. I join him, reaching over to ruffle Edred's soft blonde hair, now that the wind has dried it from the sweat of his exertion. I'd hoped that Edred and Louis need never know war. I'd hope that my peace accord would accomplish that, and yet, as the actions of King Constantin have shown, peace can never be assured. But I'll do all I can to keep England safe from the pretensions of the Norse. And if, in doing so, I prevent my youngest stepbrother from ever bloodying his blade in rage, then that's all the better. Chapter 4 934 The Kingdom of the South Welsh.
Hule, King of the South Welsh. Tell me again, I ask softly, what is it that you've heard? Aye, my grandson, Cadwagan. He's little more than a tottering child, and yet my son has brought him to me, concern on his face and also a hint of amusement in his eyes.
It's probably nothing.
He prevacates, but Owain hasn't summoned his son before me as his king for no good reason. The child, trying to stuff his thumb in his mouth, only to find his father's hand gently holding it away, looks at me with confusion and stubbornness. The stubbornness I recognize only too well. The fear turns my stomach. He's my grandson after all. I don't want him to dread me. Or perhaps I do.
It's a song.
Cadwagan stutters.
I've heard them singing it.
He hiccups. His face is red and splotchy. I think he's been crying. And I glower at Owain over his son's head. He shrugs a shoulder in a what-could-I-do sort of way. I can think of many other ways he could have questioned his son, but I hold my tongue. He's the boy's father, not me. I can't tell Owain how to treat his son. I know only too well that I'd not have taken interference kindly. No. If he made Cadwagan cry, then he can live with that grief for the rest of his life. And it'll pain him. I could assure Owain of that if he asked the question.
I was singing what I've heard.
Cadwagan continues, his words lisping, but just about clear enough to understand. I want to reach out and rustle that soft thatch of pale hair above his head that makes him seem hallowed in gold. He appears just as the monks achieve with their precious manuscripts for our kingdom's saints, and as I saw only too many versions of when I travelled to Rome. But I don't touch him. And what did you sing? Behind her son, Owain's wife waits frantically. She fears me as well, but that's probably for the best. After all, she has the raising of my grandsons. I must ensure her she doesn't encourage them to rebel against me. Cadwagan's voice is pure and filled with light. All eyes in the hall turn towards me, a soft expression on many of my most hardened warriors at the sound.
Warriors will scatter as far as Cait. The Welsh will reconcile as one.
The tune is pleasant, although from how he nods in time to the words, I think it perhaps contains more words than my grandson sings.
I find a smile on my lips and consider why Owain thinks I need to hear this child's story of uniting the Welsh under one king. It's a story we've all been told since childhood. The actions of my grandfather Rodri Mór have reinvigorated this dream of unification. I can't say it doesn't drive me onwards, but then Idwal of Gwynedd, my cousin, would no doubt say the same from his kingdom to the north of mine. Only one of us can triumph. I want that one person to be me. Oh, it's a beautiful song. I console my distraught grandson. The tune's bright and easy enough to recall, even having heard it only once. Cadogan's eyes brighten as he rubs a grubby hand across a streaming nose. I turn to Owain's wife, a pleasant enough woman, and nod. Eagerly she grips her son's shoulders and steers him away, soft words flowing from her mouth as she consoles him. Only when Cadogan's gone does Owain glance at me with some evident frustration.
Why did you do that? We need to know who's spreading such tales amongst the populace. I believe he heard one of the servants singing the tale, perhaps while she did the washing in the river. Other than that, I can't think who would believe it.
Why do you think they believe it just because they sing it? I query. It's just a few words. I replay them in my mind. Warriors will scatter as far as Cait. The Welsh will reconcile as one. I'm reminded of my journey with Athelstan of the English, to defeat the King of the Scots. I consider why the Scots would feature in a tale about uniting the Welsh. All the same, I'm unsure why my son has made such an issue of the lilting tale. Owain's scowl broadens. My brothers said you'd dismiss it. They said it was just another in a long line of such tales that occasionally ripple through our people. But, father, this one's different. How so? I ask, beckoning for wine and food from one of my servants. This is coming from the mouths of babes. Owain rumbles. Now I pause and glance at him. Is he right? Is this tale of some long-forgotten and mythical man, normally given the name of Sinan, different to these others? And so? Whoever is doing this has decided to have children act as their mouthpiece. Parents will listen to these gentle songs. I mean, how sweet does it sound? It'll harden their resolve and make them want to do as these innocent faces demand. They'll be acting for their children, not themselves. But it's only a tale of the Welsh together. Perhaps that's all he knows it to be. Owain urges. I fear it's more than just that. I pause again, considering the urgency in Owain's words. Then, son, track down the rest of the child's song and bring it to me. I can do nothing with half a line. So, you think it's important? He demands, eyes alight with pride at forcing Cadwagan before me. I can well imagine how that conversation will play out when he returns to his wife's side. It might be, it might not be, but yes, it's right that you're alert to all possible threats and conspiracies, even if they spring from your son's mouth. He nods, evidently missing the hint of reproach in my voice for upsetting Cadwagan as he has. I'll have the servants listened to. I'll have my sons tell me all they learn at their knees. Indeed, son, but carefully does it. I'll not have complaints that the king's son spends his days with the washerwomen and the servants. That would be beneath you. This does stop Owain, and the slash of a smile lights his face. It might, yes. I'll let you know as soon as I hear more. Owain skips from my side in such a parody of his son that my cheeks twitch in amusement. Out of babes' mouths, I muse when Owain is gone. What might that be all about? I'd suspect Idwal of being involved in any conspiracy to unite the Welsh. but I can't believe he thinks so far in the future.
No. If this is more than just the soft singing of a child, then I don't know where it originates. But I'll have to find out.
Chapter 5 935 Shaftesbury, the Kingdom of the English.
Edmund, Atheling and Prince of the English. Louis is at my side, my brother beside him. I try my hardest not to fidget. I can feel them both doing the same. I dare not look up to feel the glare of my mother. She needn't speak for me to hear the admonishment for our antics. But Bishop Elfhe's words have been ongoing for far too long. It's almost as though he knows we need the service of remembrance to be short, and is determined to make it as long as possible as punishment. Not that we did anything too wrong. Well, I didn't. Well, maybe I did. But it was long overdue that my brother Edred knew what it was to drink until he was sick. I make no apology for that. Nor, I believe, will Louis or Hakon. Indeed, even Edric, the brother of Ealdorman Athelstan, was involved in some of it. He laughed and laughed, tears rolling down his cheeks, until he fell off his stool, and the next noise to be heard was his loud snores. Not that my mother sees it in the same way, and I can understand her anger, for all my head pounds with the excess. My stepsister, the exiled queen of the West Franks, has made it clear that her son Louis couldn't possibly have been involved. Her cross words with my mother are why our foolish escapade is to be punished with more than just the usual flurry of admonishment. My mother hates my stepsister. I do as well. But Louis is my friend, so I try not to complain about his mother too much, and he does the same to Edred and me. Hakon has no memory of his mother, so he watches the interplay between our mothers with fascination and, perhaps, I appreciate, not a little jealousy. In which case, he's welcome to my mother. Sooner she was chastising him than me. And on the words of the Bishop Drone, I've never known a mass of celebration to take so long. This place, Shaftesbury, was founded by the House of Wessex. Here my grandfather's sister was abbess until her death. Even now Athelstan takes an interest in it. He's keen for the establishment to thrive. My long-dead great-aunt isn't revered as a saint, although perhaps one day she might be. All the same, Athelstan has made a grant to the nunnery, the charter signed by the king and his allies, although not my mother. Something I don't overlook. The nunnery is to receive land at Tarrant Hinton, Dorset, to enable them to continue their work of praying for the abbess' soul, and also that of the other dead members of the House of Wessex. I've no problem with that, but I'm sure the bishop need not stress it so much as he speaks. And the archbishop hasn't even begun his sermon yet. I shake my head, trying to force my eyes open. I can feel myself swaying. We'd stayed up too long drinking. I'd barely shut my eyes, or so it seemed, when a cold bucket of water rudely woke me, with my mother's acerbic tone telling me to wash and dress for the king's service. Perhaps had the king been involved, we'd have been treated more kindly, but as I turn to look at Athelstan, majestic in his finery, I think not. The king doesn't drink to excess, or indeed do anything to excess other than govern well. I can't think that he'll be best pleased by our display. Once more I hear my mother's words from earlier. "Do you want the king to think of you like he did your step-brother Edwin?" The argument had been a hiss of outrage, directed at me, but not at Edred, for Edred had his head in a bucket. The sound of his retching turning my stomach. I'd swallowed hastily, not wanting to embarrass myself further. It was, I'd begun, but no further words had come forth. We're at the royal estates, close to the nunnery of Shaftesbury. Did you want everyone here to know you're no better than your little lamented older stepbrother? You'll be king one day, my son. You'll rule here and the whole of England, and yet you drink yourself into this state, and worse, drag your younger brother into it as well." It was, I tried once more when she paused her pacing to take in a much-needed breath. "And Edric should know better. He's a grown man." What was he thinking? Not that it matters. It's you and your brother that everyone will be watching today. The nuns in the nunnery, and the bishop and the archbishop. They'll smell you from 10 hides away. She continued to rant. I shake my head to clear the conversation from my mind, only to swallow convulsively once more. The scent of vomit that pervades my brother reaches my nostrils. I gag and swallow down any urge to void my stomach. Bad enough to be found unconscious in a pool of saliva in the royal hall close to Shaftesbury. Should I vomit here in the nunnery church? Well, my mother would never forgive me. A lull in the service has me glancing up, hopeful that the bishop and archbishop have concluded their sermon. But there's no such luck. Bishop Elfhay might have completed his task, but now Archbishop Wulfhelm replaces him. He settles himself and then meets my gaze, a quirk on his lips before he begins to preach. This part of the service is at least in the tongue of my people. I can understand everything he says, not that the Latin of the Mass is entirely lost on me. I've been taught in the school at Glastonbury Monastery, and I've been listening to the same since I was no more than a baby. The tenor of the Mass is easy enough to follow. The words of the Archbishop are at least far from as admonitory as Bishop Elfhay's. Archbishop Wulfhelm instead praises Abbess Ethelgifu, the daughter of King Alfred, and the abbesses and religious women since her death. He also speaks of King Alfred and all he accomplished before turning to my father, King Edward. To hear my father spoken about, a man I've nothing but vague memories of, is always strange. The men and women of the Witan knew my father as more than just a figment of their memories. They spoke with him and carried out his orders and instructions. They believed in his vision of Wessex, and then Wessex and Mercia combined to become the kingdom of the Anglo-Saxons. It took many of them much longer to be convinced of my stepbrother's vision of England. I listen, my nausea forgotten, as Archbishop Wulfhelm lists the accomplishments of my father and his sister, Lady Ethelflad of the Mercians.
Following the wishes of King Alfred, King Edward and Lady Ethelflad pushed back the boundaries of the kingdoms of the Saxons, initially with small steps and then with more assured ones. First, Bremisbrigg, Scaregate, Bridgenorth, and then Tamworth and Stafford, Derby, Brunanburh, and Nottingham. At the same time, King Edward reclaimed Northampton, Leicester, and Felwall, and then the prize of it all, the allegiance of York, if not York itself.
Here the Archbishop risks a glance at Athelstan. I appreciate once more that the battle for the north that my stepbrother undertook has been ongoing for many years. Indeed, the Treaty of Aymont was only the latest in a long line of alliances and peace accords agreed with those of the kingdoms of the Scots and Strathclyde. Of what, then, does the Archbishop speak? Is it praise, or is it a call for caution? One I don't believe the king needs. Athelstan is cautious, I'm sure of it. He has what he wants, but doesn't expect it to be easy to maintain. King Athelstan inclines his head towards the Archbishop, acknowledging those words. While I'm grateful to allow the final sentences of the Mass to tumble over my sleep-deprived and ale-addled mind, I consider those words, perhaps more than I should. My mother's correct. One day I'll be king. But I pray it will be many years in the future. I don't wish to have to replace my stepbrother when his task is only just completed. And I'm sure there are those who think to undo it. No, I need Athelstan to rule for decades yet. Perhaps I'll only be king when I'm old and grey. The thought doesn't upset me, as others might think.
Chapter 6, 935. Scone, the Kingdom of the Scots.
Constantin, King of the Scots. Ildulb, son of Aldred of Brunanburh, still hasn't learned to make himself scarce. And more, I see him too often in the company of my successor, Malcolm. That turns my lips, but not as much as the whispers brought to me by men and women I trust that Ildulb has reached out to Owain of Strathclyde as well. Owain's my under-king. He has no remit to make allies with anyone. I don't believe he should. It's not passed me by that Owain was slow to respond to my request for support when the bloody English king rampaged through my kingdom. I already have reservations about his future without this complication of Ildulb of Brunanburh. If Ildulb were any sort of man, he'd have slunk from those shores long ago. He has no one to support him in any attempt to reclaim Brunanburh from the English king. He should have remained there with the warriors he did have, rather than come mewing to my side when Athelstan threatened him following the death of his father. And then there's my son, Ildulb. Should be the most loyal of them. But a flicker of unease now touches our every interaction. He speaks with my voice to potential allies, yet he's not asking my opinion. I growl low in my throat. I feel beset on all sides by those who should be my allies, but whose true allegiance I doubt. Next, there's the English king. I know to doubt him, but since he came to my kingdom with his army, including the Welsh kings who submitted to him, his actions have been nothing like a conquering king. My son Alpin still resides at his court. My submission has been made before the English. The independent kingdom of Brunanburh is part of Athelstan's England. But all Athelstan does to remind me of all that is to send the occasional messenger and ensure I make payment for warring against him. Even the restitutions he demands aren't onerous. All I must do is accept Athelstan's presence on my southern border, his detaining of Alpin, and of course, the reparations due him for bringing me to my senses for threatening to interfere in the running of the kingdom of Brunanburh. It seems that Athelstan is truly a benign force when not roused to anger. I should have learned that sooner, and then I'd not have suffered such an ignominious defeat. When, and it is when, because of all his magnanimity, I know there can only be war again, I triumph over him and rewrite the outcome of his Scottish campaign. I'll not be as soft-hearted as he is. We might share a god, but mine is more brimstone than his. Revenge must be taken. Vengeance will be mine. No matter my age, I'll take my place on the shield wall. I'll conquer him, just as surely as he's taken control of me. Father, the annoyed voice of my oldest son permeates my thoughts. I look to Ildulb for the first time, truly seeing him as my son, as opposed to someone who thinks to circumnavigate my resolve to get his own way. Son, I acknowledge. Were you, even listening to me? He queries. I shake my head. In all honesty, I wasn't listening to him. I've not heard a single word since he reminded me of the Battle of Cait. Damn the English king. He sighs and begins to speak again, taking me back to the Battle of Cait once more. Only this time, I hold my thoughts in check as words rumble from his mouth, thrumming with conviction.
Those of the other isles have tentatively agreed. All the Lord demands in exchange is a wife for his son.
They were no use to us before, I counter quickly. The thought of turning once more to the outer isles for assistance is unacceptable.